Good evening and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly hangout where Masons from around the country get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The standard disclaimer applies. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. Tonight, as usual, we are soliciting questions and comments from you via Twitter or Facebook with the Twitter handle @MasonRoundtable and or with the hashtag TMR Episode 21. That's TMR Episode 21. We'll go around with introductions. As usual, I am John Ruark, the past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia, and I'm currently the chaplain and lodge education officer. I will hand it off to Jason.
Thanks, John. My name is Jason Richards. Good to see everybody tonight. I am the senior deacon of Acacia Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, and I also blog when I can on the Masonic blog, The 2-Foot Ruler, Masonry in Plain Language.
Nick?
I'm Nick Johnson, past Grandmaster.
Whoa!
I am awesome. A past master of Corinthian Lodge number 67 in Big Time Farmington, Minnesota. And I am not a lodge officer as of right now. I also have this blog thing, millennialfreemason.com. Off to Juan.
Good evening to everybody. My name is Juan Sepulveda. I am a member of Iola Lodge, number 207 in Orlando, Florida. And I blog and podcast at thewindingstairs.com.
Great. Robert?
Hey, Robert Johnson here from the podcast Whence Came You, WCYpodcast.com. I'm the senior warden of Waukegan Lodge number 78 in Waukegan, Illinois.
Very cool. Alrighty. So usually we start off with Masonic news. Really, the big thing Masonic news this week has been a lot of new content on Robert Johnson and Juan Sepulveda's pages and blogs. You guys want to talk about that? The special invitation or interview you did with
A certain someone.
Sure. Juan and I both got to have a really good interview with Brother Joseph James about some really sweet developments that happened with his latest movie, the Freemason movie. So, Juan, you should tell everybody what's up.
Well, the long-awaited release of the DVD of the Freemason, it's finally out. Some of us had a chance to see the movie before it came in the theater. It didn't come to where I live in the theater, so we got an advanced copy DVD. So we really enjoyed it. Brother Joseph is really excited. I'm excited to see another artist's work reach the level that his has reached, and I like that it presents Freemasonry in such an intriguing yet good light.
Yeah, it's definitely a really good movie. Anybody who enjoys Freemasonry, I think, generally will enjoy the film. I don't think anybody needs to. He got a lot of that. Well, what's it going to be? Is it going to, portray us in a good or a bad light? Like you said, he did a good job.
Yeah.
And
Very
it's
cool.
got Samwise from Lord of the Rings in it, so it's awesome.
John Aston's in it, dude. He directed scenes and did a lot of the writing. So
Nice.
So the Masons are taking over Comic-Con, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
It's been done.
One movie theater at a time.
Yeah.
Taking over the world, one movie theater at a time.
Yes.
Did they say it was going to go to any of the streaming services at all, or was it just going to stay DVD?
Yes. Yeah, it's in the works to be available through Hulu and Amazon Prime. I think it's on the works. What else?
Soon on Netflix, I think.
Netflix.
Oh,
Yes.
iTunes. You'll be able to rent it on iTunes also.
Nice.
But in the meantime, you can head over to freemasonryart.com and help support the cause. It's there.
Yeah, I mean, the DVD's for sale right now as we speak.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a good deal, actually, for a unique, wholly centric movie about Freemasonry, a lot of drama, and every brother should really pick that up. Plus, I like the deal that they have where you can buy that and the movie poster for like an additional $10. So it's kind of a unique swag.
Nice.
Yeah.
And Masons love their swag.
Yeah, we do. I gave a pin to my secretary last night from Alexandria, Washington Lodge 22, and I said, "Hey man, they had these really neat pins, so I gave it to you." And he said, "What am I gonna do with this? What do we do with this stuff?" Literally. He was joking because he knows all of our pins and stuff, but I asked, "What am I gonna do with this?" I was like, I don't know.
LodgePinBanner.com.
Yep. That's it right there. Look, I got mine hanging right up here. There's like a whole bunch of pins right there. That thing is awesome. Enough of that. Any other Masonic news that came up? There's nothing that comes to mind, but definitely check out the Freemason movie. It sounds like a really cool idea. And you guys have seen it, right? Robert and Juan.
Yep.
Yeah, we saw it. I think Juan and I saw it kind of on a secure server password thing, and there was actually still some watermarks and things all over it because some of the audio was still kind of missing. We saw some rough cuts, and then we saw like a premium cut.
Wow.
So final product is even better. So.
Sweet.
Yeah, well,
John, we
had
need to
the
get
little
on
clock.
that.
So if any other Mason wants to promote shameless things to this audience, we'll be glad to review any and all things.
Yes, send us free stuff, please.
I really like Cocoa Puffs.
All right, topic for tonight, in case you haven't guessed it, Murica.
Ooh,
I
Murica.
think you pronounced that wrong. You said you emphasize an E when it is actually Murica.
Murica.
There you go.
So why America, right? Obviously there's Freemasons that have something to do with the founding of America and the founding fathers, and really I think part of this was just to have an open discussion about kind of the favorite aspect of the founding of America and how it relates to Freemasonry. One thing that when you start doing any Masonic research, you're always going to find out, hey, did you know George Washington was a Freemason? Yes, right.
What?
Okay, let's get.
He was an irregularly made Mason, too.
Yes. They don't tell you that part at first.
He sat in lodge like all of 5 times his entire life.
And they tell you Ben Franklin was a Freemason. And he also wasn't really part of a regular combined part of Masonry, eventually in the end. Did not get a Masonic funeral, right? But they don't tell you that when you first start learning. So, really, what aspects have you guys researched about kind of the founding of America and how that fits in with Freemasonry? We'll just kind of open the floor.
He's throwing that to you, Robert Johnson.
Sounds like someone has a paper about that.
I have. Yeah. So I do a presentation called Freemasonry in America and its Colonial Tavern Beginnings. So within that, there's a lot of information, and it doesn't necessarily focus on any particular famous Masons. It really does focus on, a couple names here or there that may be a little familiar, but on the whole, it focuses on the fraternities that met in these taverns and the basements of these taverns and things like that, that essentially made some prompt decisions to start some interesting groups that, I think really did lend to the formation of America and the, our eventual independence. So.
Right. I think the elephant in the room is really, if we're taught to be good citizens of the state as Freemasons, how did we end up participating in a rebellion?
Thunder stolen.
Well, we've all been talking about it, so let's get right to it.
Well, I mean, if you look in the go ahead, Robert.
I was just saying, Jason had some good stuff. That's all.
Well, looking at Anderson's Constitutions of Masonry, written by another famous Freemason who was actually expelled from the fraternity, if you didn't know. In Section 2, he has an entire section concerning government and civil magistrate. And it says, nor can a real craftsman ever be concerned in plots against the state, or be disrespectful to the magistracy, because the welfare of his country is his peculiar care. He is not to be countenanced in his crimes of rebellion against the state, but he forfeits all benefits of the lodge, and his fellows would refuse to associate or converse with him in private while he continues his crimes, that neither offense nor umbrage may be given to the lawful government. I mean, that seems pretty, cut and dry. That if you are a Mason, you should be faithful to your country.
Right. So what is the country, though? The people or the government? I think, when I look at that kind of stuff, my argument is that's actually a part of the presentation I do. I ask that question: how could Masons have participated in a rebellion if we took an oath to our country? My answer is, what supersedes allegiance to any one thing except the relief of the distressed? So to me, distressed peoples supersedes all things. I feel that in that time, if you were a Mason and you were obviously a member of some militia group or some sort of society that was bent on relieving the distress of the common people and relieving or helping with the welfare of all these groups and peoples, I think they had to do what they had to do. I mean, we all know that it was only because of a lack of representation in Parliament. I mean, if we had one rep, we might be using British pounds today, but...
Boy, do I mean, I would never wish that. Greenbacks all the way. Well, the thing is, what really kind of fascinates me, though, is that there wasn't even agreement among Masons on whether we should even be a participant in any kind of revolt against the crown, because, when they had dumped the tea in the harbor, Ben Franklin was vehemently opposed to it, and if you read some of the articles he wrote, he was just disgusted by the actions taken by the Sons of Liberty, and he was demanding that every single dollar be repaid. So I mean, even our own Masonic brothers were of two minds on this entire.
Right, and so that's another thing. So I've been rereading Solomon's Builders, which was Chris Hodap's preface before the Lost Symbol book came out. He was trying to get ahead of all the DC founding and symbolism, right? And he actually spends a lot of time up front talking about basically the Age of Enlightenment and how all these ideas came over to America. And, the first time I read it, I really wasn't thinking about that. I was really trying to jump to the end, trying to jump to what's in DC that I can, go explore. But rereading it again, he does do a very good job of packing a lot of historical information about what was going on in that time frame. And as you alluded to, Nick, you had British loyalists that were also Freemasons that were in the colonies.
Yeah.
And so Freemasonry helped unite the colonies, if you really think about common bonds that could be passed through, the entire East Coast. But obviously, Freemasonry itself did not lead to rebellion. One thing that I think Chris Hodap surmises pretty well in here is that Freemasonry does teach liberty, freedom, democracy, right? And those are key issues that kind of led to other things like John Locke's writings, Thomas Paine's writings, right? And so another interesting thing that came out of here related to that was that while Freemasonry did not directly influence the rebellion, it can be said that the society was influenced by Freemasonry. They even said in Boston, 1 out of every 25 people in Boston was a Freemason. And so that even brought the Age of Enlightenment concepts of logic and reason and fighting for liberty and freedom of thought, even though the layperson may not have either been a Freemason or been exposed to those ideas, just by hanging around Freemasons that are talking about reason and enlightenment, helped to spark, potentially may have sparked some of those conversations.
Absolutely.
So it's a good book if you haven't read this before. Solomon's Builders.
I need free copies, Hodap.
I was trying to find the title of a book that I have been reading. It's in Spanish. Is late 19th century book about Masonry, and it goes into detail and very eloquently explains that the three main enemies of Freemasonry are ignorance, superstition, and tyranny. And I really like the way in which it explains, almost in a metaphorical way, how to look at these things and how to look at our own development. For example, there's a lot of allegory as to digging and manual labor, breaking stone, much more than what we're used to hearing. But one of the things that it talks about is that you are removing from the stone of society, basically. You're removing these superfluities, which are tyranny, superstition, and ignorance. Now, superstition is for another episode.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, that's gonna be good.
Your favorite Masonic conspiracy, baby.
I've got one of those for later in the episode, but it's not going to do the best for the audio listeners, so people watching really get it. But I'll try to do my best to describe it for audio listeners later. Good one.
Cool. Nick, you had some other thoughts you wanted to share?
Well, I was thinking about it too. I think I mentioned this on the last episode where I was watching a show on PBS about the Revolutionary War, and it was entitled "Rebels and Redcoats." And it said, they essentially used the two terms that each side used to describe each other, in classic jingoist fashion, to minimize and make your enemy look evil, right? And it's kind of funny when I was thinking about it is that one man's freedom fighter is another man's rebel. And so, I still to this day have a tough time equating, what Anderson is saying in his Constitution to the actions that the Sons of Liberty, etc. took. I mean, it's one of those that, it's at one point I've heard that a vast majority of American colonists were opposed to any kind of independence movement, and it took many years to finally convince the vast majority to move over. And and still, at the end of the war, loyalists were being forced into Canada or in hiding, and I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this other than to say that, I understand where freedom is, or that Freemasonry is associated with liberty and freedom, but at the same time, we're essentially told you're free, but within constraints.
So the real question was, and let's get posited here, is based on reading the constitutions, Anderson's constitutions, is disobedience or rebellion to your state a Masonic offense? And it goes on in the constitutions to say, I think the continuation of where Jason was reading, that if a brother should be a rebel against the state, he is not to be countenanced in his rebellion. However, he may be pitied as an unhappy man. So in other words, it's saying, shame on him for not being loyal, but he's not breaking any Masonic laws.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you're not going to be expelled from the fraternity for rebelling. It's just you kind of should be on your best behavior.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I heard. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it goes along with the idea of yourself and your actions as a good man being a reflection of the overall fraternity. And I'm in no way, shape, or form condemning the actions that our founders who were Freemasons took, because I am very, very happy with what they did and how it's turned out so far in the past 200 and close to 240 years. but it does give me pause to read the constitutions, which predated the American Revolution by at least 50 years or so, I would imagine.
Oh, easily, yeah.
I'm not sure when Anderson actually wrote them.
I can tell you in a second.
I seriously want to search on Google to see if there's a group that wants us to reunite with England. There's got to be one. There's a Flat Earth Society. There's got to be a American Colony Reborn.
Yeah. 1728. That's
1728.
This Constitution.
So,
That's right.
Jason, over your left shoulder, you have the book House Undivided.
Yes.
So, if anybody, so then the other book that I think it goes pretty well with that, is another book John and I have both read also, which is The Better Angels of Our Nature. It's about Masonry in the Civil War. So, if you think about what we're talking about, the Anderson's constitutions, it's not really breaking Masonic law, but then they talk about some other things in there that. My point is, so a lot of guys were considered crimes against a newly formed government at that time, right? But you have Confederates and Yankee soldiers going to lodge together, crossing lines and sitting in lodge together. So you kind of look at it that way too, where they didn't give a hoot, about anything. Masonry superseded it.
Now, see, that brings up a good question, because Holleran does a really good job in Better Angels of Our Nature to talk about how brothers looked out for each other across enemy lines.
Yeah.
Have you read anything about how that also happened in the Revolutionary War?
That's an interesting question. I have never even thought to look there.
Neither have I, but that just kind of sparked.
The only story that I actually remember reading is there was somewhere in one of the mid-Atlantic states, a caravan carrying lodge materials, lodge jewels, etc., was captured. If I remember correctly, it was an English lodge that was captured by the colonists, and what they had done is they had seen that they had done this, and immediately upon receiving those items, passed them along to the lodge to ensure that they've arrived safely. I can't remember exactly all the details, but I do remember that there's at least one story that comes from the Revolutionary War about that.
Cool.
And another thing I was going to add in my research too, I didn't really realize how disorganized the colonial Freemasonry really was, because of the military lodges, because of the British presence, because of all these provincial Grand Lodges that came from England, from Ireland and Scotland, and it was just who could come first, and then it still has a lot of that history of, how the first Grand Lodges in the U.S. were formed. Some take some credit because they were earlier than 1717, but then other people say, well, that doesn't count because it was before 1717.
Yeah, you had lodges being chartered down in like Louisiana and French territories. You had Boston, Massachusetts dealing with both what you would call ancient and modern. There were two Grand Lodges at one time. There was and back like today, when somebody says, well, he was unaware of the AF and AM versus F and AM type deal in America, they say, well, what lodge should I join? And we always say it doesn't matter, because it doesn't really. But back then, it sure did.
Yeah.
Now, there's really only one ancient Grand Lodge left in the United States, and that's in the state of Pennsylvania. So.
And we know how they turned out.
But the first official one was in Virginia. So, and you could argue it all day, and I'm sure I'll get some slack from Paul Chamberlain on that one. All right. Nick, did you want to talk about the pledge?
Oh, sure. Well, I guess so. I already can feel the hate mail coming, so it's already coming. There's brainwaves. But
just remember, this is an open, constructive discussion, and that's for everybody listening and watching too.
Yeah. Well, all right. So nobody tell anybody where my address is.
.com.
But anyway, I was chatting with you guys earlier. I think earlier this week about the pledge, and in most lodges we do the pledge. Now it depends on if it's before the lodge opens or after lodge opens, but for the most part, even if it's optional, people are doing it, right? I mean, it's almost reflexive, you know. You just, oh, lodge's open, everybody, pledge time, right? And I was thinking about it. Is that you know, you know, we are a universal fraternity, right? One that you go from country to country and you pull out a dues card or a Master Mason certificate, right? And you show up, you can sit in that lodge and share fraternal greetings and fraternity with guys all over the world, right? As I've heard, the sun never sets on Freemasonry, right? And so, when we do a pledge to the American flag, essentially what we're saying is, welcome to an American lodge, and this is American Freemasonry, and very that I don't know. I mean, when all these flag codes started showing up inside of Freemasonry, it was immediately after World War One, right? So the fervor was already at fever pitch, and I just think if we're going to be a universal fraternity, we should at least accept the fact that we are universal, and I just don't know if a Pledge of Allegiance to any flag is appropriate in a lodge.
So that brings up a good point. There's two things we're not supposed to talk about in lodge, and they are
Religion and politics.
right. One time in my research, I read a third one, which is borders, meaning that because we come from the guild system of free, meaning we can travel anywhere, that borders is also another piece of information that divides men. To say my state's better than your state, my country's better than your country, my football team is better than your football team. Go Ravens!
Any day.
and so I wish I could find that reference because I truly think
our soccer team is worse than the Belgian soccer team.
Yeah.
Belgians.
I believe. But I really think that should be reemphasized to the candidates coming in, that it's not just religion and politics that are off the table to maintain harmony. It's also borders, and so that really kind of proves Nick's point, right? That when you have visiting travelers from around the world, which our lodges have quite often, it's like, okay, and now we're all going to go pledge, and you're going to feel a little awkward if you're visiting and everyone's kind of doing their thing.
I completely disagree, but Juan, you go ahead.
I was going to say that the book I mentioned earlier also mentions that as the third thing not to speak of in the lodge, and it describes it as nationality. So it does talk about the difference, not just with about a different nation, not just necessarily the differences of a local community. And if you think about it this way, this is how I see it. It is the way in which the order protects or puts at a priority the identifying, like the common denominator among all of these people is going to be Masonry. So your loyalty to another brother is superior to the other loyalties related to religion or nationality or politics.
Which would explain things like the Civil War,
Exactly.
the other war that we've been in. Right. Okay. Jason.
But at the same time, I agree with all of this, but that notwithstanding, I still think there's a place for a lodge to pay homage to the country that is letting Freemasonry practice uninhibited. The United States is a great example where we as Freemasons can join our fraternity and do whatever we want really with the fraternity without a whole lot of government interference and intervention. So in that case, I think it's almost a sign of respect to give some sort of homage to that country in which that particular lodge is situated. And it'd be the same thing for us, singing "God Save the Queen" in Great Britain or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they toast the sovereign in English lodges, and even then, I I don't know. I just think that there's this idea of universality, right? And
Mhm.
so, and obviously it ignores that. I'm trying to think of how to put this correctly, but you know, it's one of those that I do, because it's not like I feel like we don't honor the pledge anyway, because essentially it is reflexive. You know, it's guys just jump up, ready to go, sit down again, right? And let's talk about the minutes, right? But I mean, and full disclosure, I mean, a Freemason did in fact write the original pledge.
Mhm.
Bellamy, he did in fact write the pledge, but you know, it does. It feels like a separation, and
Mhm.
just feels wrong to me.
I mean, I can totally see that.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what. When I first went to Open Lodge, my very first meeting, I remember how I felt when the Pledge of Allegiance was recited, and my reaction was very positive. I felt proud when it was happening,
Juan's a
and huh?
You're a patriot.
Yeah, but
You're gonna have to
at
change my lower third here. You're gonna have to say not patriot.
call me.
Well, you know, in addition to that, though, you know, one of the main reasons why I like saying the Pledge of Allegiance in Lodge, outside of saying it for as a reaffirmation of our support of this great country, is the fact that there are so many conspiracy theorists and tinfoil hat wearing nutcases out there that say the Masons are going to bring down the United States government. And to that I can say, well, the Masons who say the Pledge of Allegiance, before every single meeting they have.
Mhm.
And that's a great source of pride to me, and continuing pride, like it is for Juan Sepulveda, which I think is why I'm, so like incredibly pro Pledge of Allegiance in the Lodge.
Yeah, I also think that keeping the flag, doing the pledge in lodges, I love it. You can ask my wife. I mean, it took me 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, I wrote an email to my son's school asking why they hadn't recited the Pledge of Allegiance yet. And the response I got was, he's in kindergarten, they're getting acclimated. I was getting hot about it after only 2 weeks. Not to get in a debate, I don't fall on either side of the version of the pledge, that get into. I don't really care about that. To me, it's about the country. I think I like the pledge in the lodge.
My 4-year-old knows the Pledge of Allegiance.
That's cute.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, people that know me, they know I am Puerto Rican. I was born and raised in the island of Puerto Rico. Now, not everybody that knows that Puerto Rico is a United States territory. We are born Americans. The moment that we see the light for the first time, we are recognized as Americans. So I am proud to be Puerto Rican, but I'm also proud to be an American, which is is one of the reasons why I felt so moved when I first saw it, and I had the privilege of actually walking the flag during the Pledge of Allegiance. So
You can stay on the show. Nick's out.
Well, hold on a second. You know that Bellamy was a Christian socialist.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
The
did I just
plot
repeat
thickens.
that one?
John, I think it's time for us to do last.
What's on the Twitter board?
Yes, social media time.
Cut to commercials.
Here's something interesting from Frank. I can't say his last name. Scrobot, I think. He asks the question, how did the framers get around the rule against talking politics in the lodge?
Oh,
Well,
go
my
ahead.
reaction to that is, if you're meeting in a tavern where the beer is flowing, I think you're going to talk about it, regardless.
What you got going on is So you had, of course, Nick mentioned the Sons of Liberty earlier, which is just one group, which was composed of a few other groups. So you had the lodge meeting, some like-minded individuals in Mott Lodge got together, maybe stayed a little late. So you had the Loyal Nine, you had the Boston Caucus, which was one of the first of its kind, and also the Boston Committee of Correspondence. You had different correspondence committees. So those guys are the people who were talking the politics, I think, more than anybody else. And they just happen to be a bunch of Masons. Maybe a few non-Masons mixed in, but as you
And
said,
also,
1 in 25.
yeah, and a lot of those lodge buildings were also, above taverns. The taverns were the social network of their time, right?
Yeah, that was where men met on the level.
Yes.
Well, and only 9 of the signers of the Declaration were actually Masons. So that's 9 out of 56, whatever percentage that is. I mean, it wasn't as many as we think.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
So can I show
See, I'm a rainy cloud today. I'm just
Roughly
like
18%, I think.
I was going to say about 20, yeah.
I'll figure that out after the show.
The other thing that about Frank's question, the fact that these men who were passionate about their pursuit of liberty and happiness, they were Masons, but that doesn't mean that the Masonic meetings had any relations to the discussions, and it didn't mean that the actual lodge was in support of such rebellion. These, just in the same way that I'm a Toastmaster, but that doesn't mean that just because I'm a Toastmaster in the meeting, they are, if I were plotting anything, that doesn't mean it's not. I'm not guilty by association,
Yeah.
But you do make good breakfast.
Yes. The Great Toastmaster Rebellion of 2014.
I make a mean toast. But these men were passionate. They had a vision for what they wanted their country to be, and what was happening at the time really was far from what they envisioned. So just like today, we're not supposed to talk about religion in lodge, but if we're meeting afterwards, I've heard some preachings.
or maybe go session over to a local house of worship to attend services and then process back.
With dispensation.
What else you got, Jason?
Let's see. We've got some comments from our friend Richard Ingham, who's actually put out a plug for a book I have downstairs on my bookshelf. It's Revolutionary Brotherhood by Stephen Bullock, and that actually tells of cases where American and British Masons actually met together during the Revolutionary War. And one case in particular, there was a Chief Joseph Brant who spared the life of an American officer in the Revolutionary War. So that's another good book to pick up if you're interested about Freemasonry and the American Revolution.
I just bought it for $0.25 last week. I swear to you.
Actually, you missed another question from Frank. I was just checking the same time you were. He had heard that George Washington was not a very active Mason. True or false?
Yeah, I actually tweeted him back and told him we already covered that in the beginning of the episode.
The answer is yes, he was not very active. Right.
Yeah, we had so much faith in him, we almost made him the Grand Master of the United States of America.
Yep.
And King.
And King.
I've seen the photo. He looked handsome in the crown.
That photo, the real photo of George Washington.
And then he had that apotheosis moment,
Yeah. Cool. Anything else, Jason?
No, that's all we've got on the Twitter feeds.
Man, nobody wants to kill me?
Well, I haven't checked Facebook yet.
Just wait for the Reddit spam. You're gonna get it hard tomorrow.
Yeah. They're gonna say he shouldn't be a mod anyway. Honestly, opinions like that. Why don't you turn in your citizenship?
On that note, let's go around, do our final thoughts and closing comments, starting with Jason.
Hey, thanks, John. You know what? We did the show because, of course, it's July 1st now. Unless you're listening to the audio podcast, in which is probably like December 23rd or something like that. But you can visualize it in your head. We're doing this because it's July 4th coming up here in a couple days. And one thing that I really want to do, instead of giving any other plugs whatsoever, I really just want to plug our servicemen who are members of the craft, who are also veterans who have either had to work on the 4th of July or are currently working this 4th of July. I thank you so much for everything that you do for the service to this country and the freedom and the Masonic values that you espouse in the service to your country. It's just a phenomenal testament to your life as a Mason and your character, and everybody here on the Masonic Roundtable is deeply indebted to you for the sacrifices that you make so that we don't have to. With that, see you guys next week.
Wow. Kind of hard to follow that one. Got a little teary-eyed there. All right, Nick, try to follow that.
Yeah.
With some socialist comment.
So, I want to pull out Mao's little red book here, and I'm going to read a few pages. And I would like to get everyone on.
Good night, everybody.
But but
John,
I'll
you've
read
got a mute button there.
So I'll read Bellamy's original pledge, and it goes: "I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." I could totally be behind that kind of pledge. And actually, he had considered, but then he knew that it would be booted by pretty much every state superintendent for education because of Jim Crow laws, etc. But originally it would have said, "I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty, equality, fraternity, and justice for all." I could totally be behind saying those words every single day of my life. With that, final thought, I have this blog that I'm going to update one of these days because apparently they didn't hate me enough last time, so they made me Grand Chaplain yet again for the Grand Council. No applause, please, because I don't need it. But anyway, I want to say I hope everyone has a wonderful July 4th. Hang out with your fam, watch the fireworks, and let's think about all the things that our founders were so able to do, especially with one of the greatest documents ever written in the history of the world, the United States Constitution. So with that, I'll pass it off to Robert. Let's keep stacking this up.
Jeez, happy 4th of July. That's
That's
you guys
it.
have really said the best things that I couldn't hope to convey any better. Thanks to the servicemen. I love the original pledge, especially that little line in there about fraternity. So that's all I have. I just want to thank everybody for watching, and again, like Jason said, without the sacrifices that all those guys have made, men and women, even children in some cases, we wouldn't be doing a show like this today. So, to the world, I mean, you think about that, we're worldwide. That's really, and it's not because we started small and got so big that the world demanded to see us. It's because we just have that freedom to do that. So, that's it.
Great. All right, Juan.
Well, happy 4th of July to everybody, and take an opportunity to reflect on the benefits that we have, those of us who live in this country. I'm very fortunate. You have a candle behind you, or is that fire or something?
Yes,
okay.
it is real fire.
It is both a candle and fire.
Yeah, I just noticed that, like, agitated. I feel fortunate that I was born where I was born with under the family that I was born, and the country that I live in. I think we have many privileges and benefits for this, and we might not agree with some of the things that are happening in our politics, and we will never agree 100% with the things that happen in our government, but the idea is that we continue to grow and expand and staying in touch with the Constitution and the intended purpose of it. Hopefully we can continue preserving it and protecting it as our country continues to evolve. So don't forget to go to thewindingstairs.com and freemasonryart.com for all of you that are dying to check out that movie. Hit me up.
Great. Thank you. As for me, final thoughts. Really, one thing that Chris Hodep tries to do very well is to see where the grand Masonic social experiment came into play in the United States. And because of how confusing Masonry was at that time and how, again, both loyalists as well as colonists and the rebellion were Freemasonry or Freemasons, it's very hard to really put a specific pin on was Freemasonry the spark. Nonetheless, you could say it had an influence on the thought of freedom, equality, liberty, and democracy. And one thing I wanted to also add was that the Patriot Lodge, of which Jason and I remember, really comes from the patriot of George Mason, who George Mason University is named after. Just a little bit of quick history on him. His claim to fame was forming the Bill of Rights for the state of Virginia. And when it came time to sign the Constitution, he refused because it did not have the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights included. He was so adamant about having those freedoms that we now almost take for granted, but right to assemble, right for free speech, and those kind of things, that he really wanted to make sure that came in. So that's why we call the Patriot Lodge based on the Patriot of George Mason. And so we have not only respect for the university as an academic lodge, but respect for the man himself. Although not a Mason, very firm in the patriotic values that we support today. Finally, thank you for watching. Check out our website, www.themasonicroundtable.com. Please help us donate. We're running this out of our own pockets, and so anything you can throw to us would be great to pay for podcast hosting. Thank you very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. Good night.